Manners from Heaven by Quentin Crisp. Chapter 4. The Art of Crisperanto. Opening quote. Considering manners, even in their superficial aspect, no one, unless he be a recluse who comes in contact with no other human being, can fail to reap the advantage of a proper, courteous, and likable approach, or fail to be handicapped by an improper, offensive, and resented one. Emily Post, Etiquette. When I was a child, the only time I felt united with my brothers and my sister was when someone was present who attracted more ridicule than I. One such victim was a little girl with a pronounced squint. At a party we all teased her so much that she ran and appealed to my mother with the question, "My eyes aren't different, are they?" My mother replied, "Each is beautiful in its own way." Tact is a major branch of manners. It depends less on a standard of behavior that can be learned in childhood than upon a huge vocabulary and an ingenious mind accustomed to dealing with the vagaries of human behavior. From the surly curmudgeon, who broods blackly in his bile, to the sunny young lady upon whose countenance naivety glistens like a dewdrop. Human nature is trickier stuff to handle than liquid nitrogen. It sometimes appears safe and solid, but is likely to turn into a combustible gas at any moment. Learning to say the right thing when one's audience is so diverse, and sometimes perverse, is an art for which there are few general rules. One learns by climbing a social ladder where every rung is slippery. When I lived in England, I knew a woman who would say something like, "Such a nice day, I think we should go out." And I would say, "All right." "Shall we walk by the river?" she would ask. I would humbly follow, saying yes. "Oh, look at the swans," she would say. I would look and reply yes. Then one day, in the midst of what I took to be an agreeable stroll, she turned to me and said, "You never do anything with enthusiasm." And I said, no. So I came to realize that too much calm is off-putting to most people, though I like nothing better than a luxurious wallow in indifference, and that, for their sake, one should add a bit of color to one's conversation. Now, if someone were to say, "Such a nice day, I think we should go out," I would reply, "I was hoping you would suggest that." Then, if she said, "Shall we walk by the river?" I would reply, "Oh, it's one of my favorite walks." And when she said, "Look at the swans," I would reply, "Aren't they marvelous?" This gives people the feeling that they are doing things right. You are praising them in praising the world. It was through many such experiences that Crisperanto was created. Crisperanto is a manner of speaking in which a sentence gets all dressed up to create a pleasing impression. It wears a bit more eyeshadow, rouge, and lipstick than is absolutely necessary. Some people may even say that's laying it on a bit thick. And then it saunters forth, or, if it is witty, it sallies, to lightly amuse a jaded world. Unlike Esperanto, which reduces several European languages to their common denominators, with the aim of producing a basic vocabulary of simple words and concepts. Crisperanto is composed of a rainbow of words, from the arcane treasures of antiquity to the latest slang from video dens of iniquity. It is speaking with a courtly flourish, artificial and insincere, like all the best things in life, but charming. Its sole purpose is to mislead people into thinking that one takes an affable interest in anything they say or do, which pleases them and costs one nothing, thus keeping the social machinery oiled and working efficiently. It is best to begin all conversations by being bland, rather than witty or what Americans call smart. You start, in a very general way, with anyone you haven't met before, or know from experience is likely to feel at a loss socially. Your words should convey that you take a mild interest in meeting them, nothing that will startle an antelope soul. You must never blind anyone with your cleverness or your education. To be on the safe side here, you should cultivate your betters rather than your inferiors at every opportunity. That way, you'll resist the temptation to score easy victories over those who are not your equals. Never start off a conversation with a girl who looks absolutely terrified with a quotation from Ovid. But if, upon further acquaintance, she turns out to be a classical scholar, then of course you may quote Latin until it almost becomes a living language again. Having begun by serving the thinnest of conversational consommé, you proceed with care to add more substantial ingredients. A few spices, even a dash of sherry. If successful, you will create a savory soup for two. If not, you will end up eating your words in another sense. It is easier to be well-mannered with people that one can see, inasmuch as one has chosen to meet them by attending a certain social gathering. In the parlance of the young, one is psyched up to the ordeal of civility. The invention of the telephone, however, enables people to barge into our homes at the most awkward moments, and it is scarcely a consolation that they intrude upon us with a disembodied voice, when one is secretly wishing they were disemboweled instead. It is in trying moments when people make too many demands, or make demands at the wrong time, that manners are most needed. Now that my telephone number is known to be in the Manhattan directory, I receive calls all day and all night. Frequently they come at times when I am dashing out of the house or already asleep. The difficulty with the phone is that nobody can see that you already have your hat on your head and umbrella in hand. So they are free to regard your excuse, "Oh, you've just rung me up as I was leaving," as a lie. A great many people find it hard to believe that you are not ready at every moment to give them your time, your entire attention, and your entire energy. So when people ring me up and I am leaving the house, I try to give a little explanation of why I'm leaving the house, even where I am going. I try to paint a picture of what they cannot see, so that they will be more inclined to react considerately and not feel insulted if they receive short shrift. It could be that one is dashing into the washroom, or that one's hair is covered with soap. It could be anything. It may be pure fiction, but by giving a caller a good excuse, and a few details of why you cannot talk for long, you will create an impression that placates his feelings while placing a limit on the annoyance to you. You have to take a little extra time, although you may not want to take any time speaking to the person in question, in order to save time in ending the unwanted conversation as quickly as possible. I generally find that most telephone callers dawdle and need polite guidance to get to where they're going, probably because the telephone lends itself to being used as an instrument of informality. And informality is a waste of time. A lot of people repeat what they say. They ask the same question several times, either forgetting that you've already answered it, or else forgetting what you said when you answered. You must never say, "I've already answered that question. Shall we go on to something else?" You must begin all over again with just as much enthusiasm, but never with the same words, because when you utter the same words you used the first time, they may remember they have asked you the question before, and may think that by repeating the same words you are reminding them of their forgetfulness. Since it is absolutely essential that no one should ever be made to seem boring or repetitious, you must avoid any suggestion that you are weary of what they are saying. Then there are people whose questions cannot be answered, and they will not accept your legitimate excuse. I don't know your mother, so how can I tell whether she is pretending to be ill or not? You must look or sound as if you will, just by talking, arrive at the answer. Not that you necessarily have the answer, but you are interested in working from the outside until you have the answer by saying, "Well, describe what your mother does and says when she is trying to prevent you from leaving the house because she says she's too ill for you to leave," or whatever it is. All of these situations can be trying, fascinating, but trying. But at least they show that people are interested in you, try to make communication with you, and place some store, if only temporarily, in what you say. But such people require manipulative skill to prevent their becoming an intolerable nuisance. Some people, even those with no fame to contend with, feel the need to create a buffer between themselves and the jingling, jangling telephone world. The rich hire secretaries to screen all their calls and then set up appointments for real conversations. Members of the middle class become subscribers to telephone answering services, or else they buy a robot, a little tin man who utters a fixed message and tells callers to chirp when they hear the beep. It has become a craze among the electronic generation to leave cute, pre-recorded messages on their answering machine. Husky woman's voice, "I'm all tied up right now, but as soon as he leaves, I'll return your call." So that even routine calls end up sounding like dial a joke. The line between defense, having a machine to filter one's calls, and offense, wasting the time of everyone who rings up with a self-indulgent gag, is a fine one. Answering machines can have their uses, but like anything touched by humans, they are more likely to be abused. All New Yorkers are familiar with the oral equivalent of Chinese water torture encountered nowadays when telephoning a large store or company. Instead of receiving prompt, efficient, and courteous service, you find yourself listening to Ponchielli's Dance of the Hours or some other musical claptrap while waiting for someone to answer your call. There is probably a theory worked out by some psychologist, who, instead of remaining a good doctor, went into market research instead, which states that people will wait longer for service if they are soothed by lullabies into comatose submission, while the company saves on the number of workers it hires to answer your calls. As for the poor, the only buffer they can afford is to unplug their phones, with the obvious disadvantage that when the quiz master calls offering an all-expense-paid trip to Bermuda in exchange for an explanation of who Maria Montez was, they won't hear about it. But then, the poor always have bad luck, it seems. To me, a telephone is a window facing the outside world, and I feel obliged to keep it open. Who am I to refuse a call from anyone? Instead of using a buffer to protect me, I employ the art of manners so as to be open to every social opportunity. I need every free meal I can get, but not to be imposed upon unbearably by bores, windbags, and psychos. One day, I fancy, someone will ring up saying, "I have this friend you may like coming into town. She used to be in the movies. Why don't we all have lunch tomorrow?" And when I show up, the next day, the surprise guest will turn out to be Maureen O'Hara. She will smile, and I will hear an Aeolian harp playing an Irish air, and our memories will do a little jig. Meanwhile, back on the Lower East Side, one of my most frequent callers, at present, is someone I've never met. She has a young-sounding voice, and introduced herself after The Naked Civil Servant was repeated in the New York area on television. She seems timid and shy, but is not without perceptiveness. The thing that struck me the most when watching the film is that you never wanted anything for yourself. I was delighted that she had noticed something so subtle that even professional critics had not detected it. Yet for the rest of her calls, she had nothing much to say and merely needed someone nice to share her nothingness with. While I answer all of my telephone calls with the same words, "Oh, yes," with a yard-long drawl, upon learning that the caller may be a meandering nuisance, I spring into action with defensive manners. "Oh, how nice of you to call. I can spare about 5 minutes, if you like, but then I must dash to the post office. I have this urgent letter that must go to Europe, and I'm trying to catch the special delivery pickup at noon. How are you?" For a maximum of 5 minutes, I am a captive audience, drying my nails. Then the guillotine falls. "Oh, my goodness, it's nearly 12. I'll barely make it. Yes, so nice talking to you." And then I go back to whatever I was doing, which sometimes is as little as staring at a blank wall and admiring its purity. Of course I lie to people, but I lie altruistically, for our mutual good. The lie is the basic building block of good manners. That may seem mildly shocking to a moralist, but then what isn't? This book is not for the morally squeamish. If a moralist were to go into the bed linen business, instead of inventing something as exquisite as an eiderdown comforter, he would probably come up with a discomforter filled with thistles and thorns, so that, even in our sleep, we would kick against the pricks. Morality, even when it is purely humanistic, devoid of all mystical and religious influences, leads ultimately to death. We must give all that we have and all that we are. A moralist, for instance, must always tell the truth. A well-mannered person could hardly survive a single day without telling a few lies, and without allowing a good many more to pass unchallenged. Good manners do draw the line at a convenient place, but quietly. Mr. Charles Chaplin once told Sophia Loren that she lacked only one laudable attribute, the ability to say no. She seems, in spite of this deficiency, to be doing all right. But if the rest of us, who lack her indestructibility, never evaded any claim upon our time and energy, we would rapidly become extinct. The takers of this world are numberless and insatiable. Once this distinction between morality and manners has been perceived and understood, how to behave well becomes, in broad terms, self-evident. Give generously what you do not need. Withhold quietly what you cannot bear to part with. Praise lavishly anyone who can never constitute a serious rival. Disparage subtly those who might outstrip you. What Mr. Machiavelli considered to be politically expedient for a prince is socially expedient even for those not of noble blood. He recommended that a prince should do all the harm he felt to be absolutely necessary on one day, but should spread good deeds throughout the year. Never argue with your wife or husband, nor hit your children in public. Deal with your loathed ones at home. Present a clean appearance, both physically and spiritually, to neighbors and even to strangers. Reserve your nastiness for your family. If the difference between your private and public behavior is remarked upon, never deny it. Make a great show of bearing the rebuke with good grace. Learn to be more accepting of life's vicissitudes. Accept opportunities for self-gratification cheerfully. Accept compliments without self-deprecation. Accept gifts without saying the giver shouldn't have given them. Accept money at once. Accept advice and get rid of it immediately. And as the astute Mr. Shaw once said, do not do unto others what you would have them do unto you. They may not have the same tastes. There is a nursery school of thought which advocates that people should be sincere, that they should be constantly expressing what's on their minds. Creeping sloppiness, the philosophy of the unruly class, holds sincerity, spontaneity, and candor in great esteem. But in fact, the usual results of practicing these pseudo-virtues is confusion, misunderstanding, and hurt feelings. In my experience, most so-called truths are emotional in their base and far more unreliable than a lie. How many times has "I love you" been whispered in the evening, only to turn into "I can't stand you" by the morning? Truth-telling has an inflated reputation in our culture. Every time the word truth is spoken, one practically hears a heavenly choir of philosophers and theologians singing the Hallelujah chorus. Yet if we constantly told people exactly what we felt at any given moment, there would be nothing but uncivil chaos. A woman boarding a bus would say to the driver, "Well, it's about time you got here, you fat slob," and he would reply, "Oh, shut up, you old bag." A teenager sitting nearby would exclaim aloud, "I hope I don't look like you ugly toads when I get older," and a woman sitting next to him would say, "Have you had a bath lately?" and so on down the aisle until, goaded and gouged, everyone's adrenaline flows and blood flows after it. Telling the truth is an activity that generally pleases only one person, and even then it is likely that the pain of it pleases him. But a well-mannered lie soothes and massages both parties so that the surface of their social relations is as smooth as a glassy sea. Whenever someone says to me, "But what do you really think about me?" him, her, it. What I really think is that it's time to go. To say what we think to our superiors would be inexpedient. To say what we think to our equals would be ill-mannered. And to say what we think to an inferior is unkind. Good manners occupy the terrain between fear and pity. So we aim at being inwardly calm while feigning enthusiasm for others, and we come to realize that the difference between a truth and a lie is as inconsequential as the difference between nonfiction and fiction. As long as it's a good read and pleases an audience, who cares how it may be classified by pedants? Ideally, our manners should be authentic. That is, one tries to integrate good manners with one's self so that they become one, at which point good manners become an acquired second nature. But this takes time and much experience. At first, behaving well, especially in situations where one is tempted to behave badly, will seem strange and something of a strain, because, in an impolite society, good manners are a form of irony, and the human brain probably consumes more oxygen and calories when it is being spiritually athletic than when it is merely slouched in a heap watching television. I know these words go against the grain of several modern fashions of thought, and may bring tears to the eyes of those poor souls who are searching the streets for a meaningful relationship and in-depth one-on-one communication. Such notions, the holy grails of pop sociology, are on a par with the medieval belief in unicorns and other fabulous creatures, which, as long as the belief endured, many people sought in dark forests and grottos, and occasionally claimed to find. A basic right of man is the right to be deceived. All I say is that he should be deceived in such a way that he feels comfortable. With this much understood, we can proceed to the next course, Advanced Crisperanto, or the technique of honing our words so fine and sharp that we can say what we mean without giving offense, even in the most delicate of situations. Manners, remember, are a way of getting what we want without appearing to be an absolute swine. This is why we go to all this trouble of getting along with people, for we never know who it will be handy to know when the next wave of the future sweeps around our feet. To know a great many people, favorably and superficially, is the best security blanket, that anyone can have.